All right, so here, really excited to get started with this one. Um, I've been looking for one of these for so long. Um, when I was a kid and I was reading, Ravi's paintball autococker articles, this was always one that I would go back to, and I don't know why. Like, I understand that you know, this isn't quite a unicorn like some of the other, Evolutions, Predators, Westwoods, etc. But for some reason, these gray Shocktechs, uh, these were just so near and dear. I love these things. I never got the chance to own one. Um, by the time I could possibly afford getting one of these, I was playing tournaments, and by then it turned into electronic paintball markers. So, um, you know, but now that mech stuff's coming back, and I just have a little bit extra income, uh, finding one of these was a priority to me. And then I've got this one, and I was really excited to find it. Finally got it. Was interested in buying it, and then finally, the guy stopped responding to my messages, and then a year later, I was able to get it, and quite frankly, I drastically overpaid for it, but whatever, because you know what, to me, it's very, a lot of sentimental value. Long story short, but when I got it, this thing was a disaster, and in all fairness, I knew what I was getting. He told me point blank, it hadn't been used in a while, and I saw from the pictures it wasn't anywhere near original or complete, but the body was intact. Uh, it looked like it was in decent shape for its age, and I just jumped on it. So when I first got it, it had a gloss black diaphragm that wasn't original. The pneumatics weren't right. It had like a trilogy ram on it, and it had a red Shocktech, the new style bomb three-way, which that's not original. No shroud. Had like a Black Magic LPR. Now, in all fairness, I will say this: when I got it and I gassed it up, it actually held air. The hoses on the bomb three-way were backwards, so it kind of scared the heck out of me. I didn't notice. I should have noticed it before I even gassed it up, but I gassed it up, and the back block flew back. Degassed, switched the hoses around, and it actually cycled. And all, like, I was unbelievably surprised that it actually cycled based on. I mean, it was dirty, it was disgusting, but took it apart, cleaned it, found some original parts for it, and we're gonna put it back together. And I'm really excited. So, it was it was a disaster. It was a mess. I mean, the bolt. This came with it, luckily. Um, Shocktech bolt might not have been. This might have not been the actual bolt that it was sold with, but it's period correct, and obviously it's Shocktech, so uh, I'm going to use it anyway, quite frankly. You know, so this actual autococker, a lot of people don't know the story behind these. You know, before these came out, most autocockers that were built by what is now Shocktech came out of Bad Boys Toys, which was the shop, Rennick Miller, Daniel Love, after Team Aftershock in Chicago. Uh, and he did mostly one-off type autocockers with different millings, different anodizing patterns, and obviously the Westwoods that everybody knows now. But those were all done under the Bad Boys Toys brand name, to come out of the shop. And then I think to get a little, maybe a little bit more marketable, maybe to make sure that they were being identified as with Aftershock, the Shocktech product line came out. A couple of different parts, the Rat 2 valve, these alien bolts, then eventually the FGP regulator. This is not one of them. This is a rock regulator, but that's what they used almost exclusively before they created their own regulator. The Shocktech bomb three-way, and then later the Ram. But this was really the first. Everybody knows now Shocktech SFL. This was, I believe, the first autococker that came out of that shop that was marketed as a Shocktech autococker. They later came out vert feed versions. These would later come out in a bunch of different fade patterns, and they were renamed the hookup series. So a lot of people still, I do not consider this a hookup series. I believe that name came after this. This is just a Shocktech Autococker. So a little bit of a short history there. So you can look up one of the article that I mentioned earlier, Ravi Chopra's article. It's on the M. Carter Brown website. I'll link it in the description. But a lot of that is what the pictures and description of that is what I'm using in my rebuild. This is kind of more or less a restoration. I'm trying to use as many original parts, but it's also something that I plan on using, so I'm tweaking it just a little bit. We'll talk about the differences later. But one thing that I thought was pretty cool, the lower tube and internals, like I said, the bolts, I've described that already. It had, a Shocktech Rat 2 valve in it, all stainless steel construction. So I actually went through before the video and rebuilt this with brand new O-rings and a brand new seal. So that's going to go back in. That's definitely period correct. The hammer, this is not a stock hammer. The hammer's actually in rough shape, so I'm going to try to use this, and then I might end up replacing it with a different hammer. But it's just so cool because you can tell. I don't know if this is a modified stock hammer or if he built this from scratch, but this indentation where it hits the cup seal, that's much larger than usual. It has a side tapped and threaded, or I'm sorry, drilled and tapped for a locking screw for the sear. There's a little bit, the back was machined a little bit of the hammer. Like I said, it's been sitting. So I don't know, I tried to clean it up a little bit, but it's still not in the greatest shape. So that's what we're going to use. The springs that were in it, I was able to clean those up. I'm going to use those because I think they're just the original, Shocktech springs that came with it, because it doesn't seem like the internals were touched much. In fact, I know they weren't touched much, because I will tell you this. The IVG that I took out of this autococker was Loctited in. Okay, I had to use an easy out on the IVG in order to get it out. All right, I don't know if you can see that so well, but it was Loctited in. It was like rounded out. This was impossible to get out. I mean, it was so difficult. But I actually took a video of me disassembling this whole thing when I got it, but technical difficulties, I'm awful with that stuff, and got deleted by accident. So it did have an original valve retaining screw in it, but I'm going to use a newer style. I love these IVG or jam nuts that have the O-ring in them. Stainless steel. I just like the O-ring. I feel like it lessens the metal-to-metal contact between the valve. I think it's all in my head, but I just feel better using them. All the builds I've ever done that had those in them, I felt better, so I'm going to use those. Frame. These had they did not have the gloss black dye frame. That was put on afterwards. Don't know what happened to it. They probably had, from the factory at this point, Shocktech did not have its own frame yet, probably had a PNP frame, an unmarked PNP frame, before I think they started engraving PNP in the side of it. That was impossible for me to find. I found this. Well, actually, this started its life as black. I had it re-anodized. I think it looks the part. It's not original, but it has front and rear trigger guide screws. And like I said, it's unmarked, but a 45 frame that looks very much like the original P&P frames would have. I mean, it's a benchmark. That's what it is. It's a benchmark that I had re-anodized to match. All right. Beaver tail, same thing. These came with P&P beaver tails. I had this one. I was able to find this one, had it anodized to match, and then a 98 shroud. So I had this also anodized to match. So these three parts, the frame, beaver tail, and shroud, were all anodized to match. and then it had the matching back block and front block. Pneumatics, these came with the Palmer's Rock Reg like I discussed earlier. So this actually luckily came with it, so I'm going to use that because it seems like it works quite well. I'm going to clean it up a little bit before I install it, and then I was able to source these original red STO parts. If you look at Ravi's article on the Shocktech, that's what was on these. So I rebuilt these. They feel good, they feel smooth. Alright, so I'm really excited to use these bad boys and get this thing up and running. So cocking rod, it had this, which this looks like a P&P style beaver cocking rod. I'm going to change the bumper out because that's not a period correct bumper. But you know, so a lot of the articles that I've seen, these have stock cocking rods, but I think that this is period correct. Might have come on it, might not have. So I'm going to use it because it was what on it, and I think it's cool, and I think it's definitely a Chicago area part. And then I'm going to use, for the internals, the trigger, I'm going to use, these had original trigger plates with slots and a stock round thread, or not stock, but a round timing rod. This is a newer style. This is a chromed trigger plate with a slot, and I'm going to use a flattened timing rod with the slotted plate for a little bit of performance. Actually was able to get a Shocktech sear, not a roller sear, but this is a sear from Shocktech. And then I think this is pretty neat. Maybe not to you, but these came with chromed out front block screws. So it's just a stock screw that they had chrome plated, and you don't see those too often. Usually you would just see, nowadays you just see either a stock screw or a stainless screw. But nonetheless, I'm going to use it. So I'm going to put this all together. I got the neoprene for the shroud. Going to have to set that up with some glue. My dog's barking downstairs, but just wanted to show you this build, and we'll be back after I put it all together. All right, bye. So we got a little shooting video for you. Got this thing up and running. Yesterday, used an adjustable regulator with a gauge, sweet spotted it, and then went back with this WGP reg, and then adjusted that. You have to take it apart in order to adjust it. Got it running real smooth, about 325 psi. It feels great. This got at the 14-inch die aluminum barrel freak board, so it's running a 687 insert right now with the paint, but it just feels great. Oop, gotta turn the hopper on. That's better. See if we can get a little downrange blast here. Seems to be shooting pretty good, man. But we gotta do one really important thing. This gun came with the shroud. It needs to have the shroud on it, because autocockers have shrouds and they're sweet. Did it again.
Sweet, man. Definitely feels good. Really smooth. I like the springing. Shoots nice. Project completed, for sure.